It is time for another episode of One Soccer Today and a special OST as we continue to go coast to coast with our seasons in review. And today we arrive in the Lower Mainland. And for this show, I had to pull out some threads that I have acquired.
Oh!
We are talking about boys in Terry Boss's
Where'd you get that?
It is
I thought you were
Vancouver
cold.
Football
Oh,
Club
I thought you were cold
on
too.
today's program. I don't live nor
good
am I a
looking kid.
teenager from BC, so I'm
That
ineligible
is
for actually documents
crazy.
that sign me. Let's spend some time with Vancouver, the
Good
Eagles, a
coloring.
year that saw Bald Eagles
wow.
take flight, abandon Callum Irving. In fact, Hercules ghosted him at one point this season. But on the pitch, it started well, it cooled off, and then it ended up pretty well close to freezing cold as VFC missed the playoffs in their sophomore season. Jordan Wilson, your number one storyline when you look back to 2024 on the Lower Mainland.
I'll say this because I came in hot, heavy about Vancouver FC and the fact that I did say that they would probably score the most goals in Canadian Premier League history for the season.
You sure did.
Because I was so excited to see the Twin Towers up top, and not so much in stature, just by the way that both of these players were a nightmare to play against, and Moses Dyer and Will Diaz.
Very good.
But that fell flat. Like, I'm looking at those two. I think they're phenomenal players. But just the 1-2 punch that Wheels, we talked about it, I was expecting, we're swinging a little bit. It didn't really hit. And I'm wondering if it's the chemistry. I'm wondering if it's the team morale, like all these little things that we saw going through the season, or the fact that maybe they weren't getting the service that they needed. But that fell so flat. To think about this team, and obviously Moses Dyer moving on to Pacific FC, I was expecting more. I was expecting maybe double digits from these guys and the Vancouver FC jersey and that beautiful cherry blossom or the black, seeing them play together. But for me, yeah, when I think back, that's what sticks out is that these two could have been like yin and yang and taken over the league, and it just didn't work for the club for whatever reason.
Jordan, what's fascinating is that Diaz this year, despite maybe not like going out and snatching the golden boot and winning it again, he was contributing a goal like every 3 games. Like he was incredibly steady. And what I think's interesting, Gareth, is there were times where the offense looked completely non-existent. But I think if we're being honest, the real disappointment for them this season was their inability to control silly mistakes and just conceding terrible goals that took them out of games.
Yes. I have a similar take, maybe a little bit different. I think there was reason to believe in this team through the early stages of the season. They started the year 4 wins and a draw in their first 7 games, and they looked
Top
like
of the
they
league.
could score or play with anyone. And that's why, those of us who are backing the Eagles to sort of the top of the Canadian Premier League table, or at least somewhere near there, I think we were rewarded. There's some decent performances. Callum Irving had a good season, like some good players in the team. And then just down the stretch, that's what broke their back. They wobbled during the summer, but they didn't come up with a win in their last 8 games of the year. They only scored 3 goals over that time period. Yeah, they dealt with some significant injuries through the year, but other teams did as well. A team with Wero Diaz leading the line and some really talented attacking players, for them to only score 3 goals over the last 8 games of the season while you're in a playoff race, that's what cost them in the end. And the way that they were going about it, they went from a team that looked a little bit more pragmatic and open at times to one that was just afraid to do anything wrong because of those self-inflicted wounds. So it was the end of the season that crushed them and ultimately cost them a playoff position.
Oliver Platt, your number one storyline?
They're the most disappointing team in the Canadian Premier League for me. That would be my storyline of the season. And I think even during the hot start, when maybe there was some excitement around them, I think, we were also expressing some concerns about how this could come undone. And unfortunately, all of them came to fruition with their inability to defend and keep clean sheets on a regular basis being right at the top of the list. So when you look at some of the talent that was brought in, you can't say that they didn't back this team in terms of going out and getting marquee players where Diaz at the top of the list. Like, I think you can say he still had a decent season because he's a very good player. But I don't think we were hearing his name enough or seeing the kind of consistency that you'd normally get out of him because this team wasn't really surrounding him, in the right way and putting him in a position to succeed. So there were a lot of problems throughout the year. They ended the year Like I think with a run of 3 or 4 losses in a row that forced them basically for the last few games just to sit 10 men behind the ball and try and scrape results, and they finished with a bunch of draws, which wasn't enough to make the playoffs. So really disappointing all in all.
A disappointing end for sure, especially when you consider the fact that they had won the Salish Sea Derby and they had done they'd won the matches against the Valors and the Pacifics to put them in that spot to control their own destiny. And ultimately, down the home stretch, it all kind of came undone, headlined by the fact that they and Atletico Ottawa played to a 0-0 draw at the outcome, which even if the results had gone their way, wouldn't have been enough. And I think there's certainly a bit of a sour taste from that. And what was interesting to me too is towards the end of the year, Afshin Gotby started talking about this center back that they had tried to acquire for the start of the season and how they'd be such a different team with this player in. And obviously that didn't transpire. They didn't get their guy. I'm wondering if the guy who has never been named by Coach Gotby is back on top of his list for off-season priorities. Vancouver has already announced an interesting initiative in that their season's tickets, and I believe all of their tickets for next year will be 80% general admission, and they're just going to allow the Vancouver and Langley communities to come in, flood that stadium, and do away with the sections and make sort of that more all for one atmosphere. But other priorities, Oliver Platt, we'll go back to you. What do you think they need the most?
Well, obviously, they need to address the defense, particularly with Rocco Romeo being out of contracts. But I think before we get to individual players and positions, they have to decide on the manager, right? Does Afshin Gotby still have the backing of the people in charge there, and does he still have the room? Because generally speaking, I think we've seen with Atletico Ottawa coming into this league that you get a season of grace and to try and figure things out and be the expansion team. And then, as long as you're being backed in the transfer market, which I think this club has been, you then need to start to deliver some results. So 2 seasons without playoffs, I think they've got to get to grips with whether they think Gotby's still the right man going forwards. If so, then they can start rebuilding this team. But if not, they're obviously going to have to decide on a different direction.
Jordan, what should be number one on their to-do list?
Ollie's right. Fair is fair, right? Like when you look at James Merriman, people talk about the fact that for the past 2 years, just shifted up formations and players and clientele and the way that they're going to play and trying to find something that sticks. It was the same for Ashton Gotby and Wheels. Every week we would prepare. Adam, you did the same. Ollie did the same. We're preparing to see, and you start to get a trend of players that are really on the uprise or doing well. And you look at Vancouver FC throughout any game this season, 14th or 26th, had no clue what was going to happen. No, that element of surprise and how you're going to mix it up. For me, it might work 1 week or 2 weeks, but you have to have some form of identity, and that has to be shown through the players that you trust. And I just don't know who he trusts. But I'll go to the football side quickly, and I talked about it on air many a time. They need a defensive midfielder. Yes, center back or Rocco Romeo is important. Yes, every team in this league could go and get a number 9. They need someone to break up play who's going to play 25 games of the year. Obviously, you're going to miss some for yellow cards, but we'll just stay in that middle and give the ball, if it's a Gabby Bitar or whoever, just someone to do the dog work, the dirty work, because too many times we talked about them going forward, but they're so easy to break down. Teams ran at their center backs, made them feel very insecure. You need someone else. Garcia, Fry, I think are competent midfielders, but to build and to really push for a 4th or 3rd place spot, you need someone that is of the upper echelon caliber in that position.
No, well, I'll add to that because I think that they probably need an attacking midfielder with more legs as well in that area. You can pick out a 6. I mean, they just need more legs, more youth, more athleticism in that area of the field. I felt like they would drop too deep at times because they didn't have that, and all 3 lines just weren't as connected as they needed to be. Center back. I think it was Adam or either one of you suggested it. Center back is the number 1 need for this team. Like Callum Irving for me was the 2nd best goalkeeper in the Canadian Premier League, and he conceded 43 goals. So the team did. That was joint most in this league. That can't be the case when you're asking your goalkeeper to come to your rescue week in, week out. So you need a strong center back pairing. And for me, it was just well off it. If they get that, get the midfield legs in there, then I think they have something to build off of, because from wide areas, their fullbacks are good. They're good players up top. It's in those critical areas that keep the team attached and together that they're lacking.
I think they have some youth and some legs. They just didn't always decide to use it for whatever reason.
Well,
Very
that's
true.
the other. I mean, that's my biggest suggestion for next season. Yes, recruitment, but Grady McDonald, TJ Daheed, James Cameron, like these young players need to be foundational pieces. Out with the old, in with the news. The expression that trust your youth, allow them to play, like allow them to learn, and then surround them with more accomplished players that can help them see them through difficult moments. That was my biggest disappointment. Even more so than the play on the field. I would have loved to see these young players on the field more.
Absolutely.
Well, with trusting the youth and trusting Jordan Wilson's ability to believe in Vancouver FC, Jordan, do you think 2025 is different? Is it the year they make the playoffs for the first time?
No, I mean it's a crapshoot in the CPL, right? You need a couple of players coming in, and it's so hard to predict in off season. But I think Ashton Gotby, you've seen how he manages for 2 years, and this is not a slate on the human being. This is just a guy who's come out in the season saying like we don't know who we trust within the locker room. I don't know which players I can rely on. If he's at the head and he's bringing in certain guys, I can't put them as a top 5 team. I just can't do that. So there's a lot to prove. I will say in this Canadian Premier League, you're not far off. Get a core that you like, play some young players that you trust, and don't sprinkle them in. Play them week in and week out, and show that you believe in them. And you're not far off from being a team that can maybe make a run in the playoffs.
Ollie, top 5 team?
No, I don't think so right now. I think the club has shown some intent again in some of the players that they've brought in. So I don't think it's impossible to imagine this team getting better and getting better quickly. But if you were asking me today, for whatever that's worth, which is maybe not much at this stage of the offseason, if you're asking me today, who would I pick to finish 8th in the CPL next season, it would be Vancouver. I think that's where they are right now, and we have to see how the next few months unfolds.
Gareth, when you think of next year with BC, and I'm curious if you think they're a playoff team or not, but this might also go part and parcel with the sort of final question for the episode is who do you think has the better 2012? Is it Vancouver in the playoffs and Pacific out? Is it Vancouver just finishing above Pacific? Like, where do you think they rank in BC?
It's hard to. I'm not trying to skirt the question, but when you look at Vancouver FC specifically, there are so many questions in terms of the squad. Very few players at the time of taping are committed, are part of the squad for next season. So I need to see what those decisions look like. All I know is that they have Wero Diaz leading the line, and most likely Callum Irving as goalkeeper. Those are 2 good bookends. And then you got to kind of fill in the blanks. Like I kind of feel like I did heading into last season a little bit that this team could be one that is ready to spring an upset and take that next step. But I just need to see how the pieces come together. It's a critical offseason for this team in order to get it right and build a team that really starts playing to their strengths.
Those bookends, to Wheels' point, won a CPL title, right? Diaz and Irving. So we'll see.
Interesting too, like the talk on Diaz, and we understand sort of what importance he has to the team. I believe, based on what I've read and what I know, that it's going to be the same situation come June again next year, where they have to go. Are we going to lose him? Does Norway want him back? Does the club in Norway want him back? Are they going to have to find a new number 9? So going into next year with him as the only option, if they can't shore up that loan to the end of the year, they're going to be another uncomfortable position in that important part of the season.
But don't you think he plays better in a 2 anyways? I think that
yes, he was
regardless
built for
what they
4-4-2,
do. I just think that you need to play to your players' strengths, and yeah, you need to bring in another striker to play alongside Wero Diaz to get the best out of him.
Especially with the Saloof experiment not working out, he's out of contract. Dyer left out of contract, so there'll be some decisions to make up top. Jordan, BC. Is it purple? Is it pink and gray or black or whichever color they're using? I'm gonna go with pink.
It's a blend of all those colors. Because for me, I couldn't
gradient.
It's whatever that is. Whatever that is the matchup. That's what it's again. I couldn't choose. Based on when Vancouver played Pacific, like you looked at them this season, you're like, okay, there's something there. But going into next year, who knows?
Can we give a shout out to Hercules the Eagle? I mean,
what a year!
So there's times you weren't sure it was going to come down. Callum Irving would land on his glove. What a star performer! That guy, that Eagle, 10 out of 10, brilliant stuff.
And I'm not exaggerating, which is kind of talking about the youth movement of Vancouver. I think Hercules was older than some of the players on the pitch. And my favorite season lasting moment, Hercules just deciding, I'm not going to fly today. I'm comfortable up
Yeah.
here. And Colin was like,
Awesome.
"All right,
Prima
I guess-
donna.
You do
I guess,
you, Hercules.
Back
I'll
in the
leave that on the
game for you.
Hercules fan. That's it for OST. Thanks for watching our VFC.